And she and I will talk about a very special project through the Animation Research Library in conjunction with the Walt Disney Animation Studios. So we've got a lot to go through, so let's get started and we'll set up. Mike, you're up.
Thank you, Fox. Well, I'm going to start out by talking about a film that I really enjoyed, which was Walt Disney Pictures' Saving Mr. Banks from 2013. Now, this film was inspired by the stories surrounding the making of Mary Poppins. Now, I, along with my cohorts at the Walt Disney Archives, watched this with perhaps a slightly different perspective, as we spent a great deal of time researching the history of Mary Poppins in order to assist the Saving Mr. Banks production team. Now, of course, when you're trying to tell the story of the making of Mary Poppins in just 2 hours of screen time, there's going to be some dramatization, but the archives offered suggestions in order to make sure that the story, or the film, was as accurate as possible. So upon receiving the script, the filmmakers began their research by referencing over 500 documents from the making of Mary Poppins, from treatment and script drafts to correspondence between the key players in the making of the film. Saving Mr. Banks co-writer Kelly Marcel, director John Lee Hancock, and actors Jason Schwartzman, B.J. Novak, and Bradley Whitford all made visits to the Walt Disney Archives in early 2012 before filming. They researched the relationship between P.L. Travers and the Disney staff and poured over hundreds of photographs of the Disney legends that the actors would portray. Now, they were also provided with all 39 hours of story meeting recordings so they could sit down and listen to how P.L. Travers interacted with the Sherman brothers and storyman Don DeGrody, which of course was a very important part of the film. Now, when it came to playing Walt Disney, Tom Hanks certainly didn't take this role lightly. He researched photographs as well as audio recordings and clips from Walt Disney's television shows so that he could learn the intricacies of Walt Disney, including his mannerisms and the way he spoke. Now, Tom Hanks admitted himself he doesn't look a whole lot like Walt Disney, but if he could capture his essence from the inside out, he could be convincing, and I certainly think he was. Now, one of the television shows that the Saving Mr. Banks teams really took a liking to was a show called An Adventure in the Magic Kingdom from 1958. And what they decided to do was actually recreate a portion of that and show it on the hotel television when P.L. Travers gets to her hotel. So what I've done for you is put together a side-by-side comparison of the original clip and the clip from Saving Mr. Banks. So let's take a look at that.
Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your television set. This is a Pixie Bell. The sound is much too high for human ear. Oh, there you are, Tink. Families. They've turned out 4,000 strong. There's going to be... No, Tink. No, I'm not flying down. Hey, get that stuff off of me. If you're familiar with the story of Peter Pan, you know that a little sprinkling of Tinkerbell's fairy dust can make you fly.
Strikingly similar. Now, as you can imagine, there are a number of scenes set inside Walt Disney's office in the film. So when John Lee Hancock came to the archives and asked for assistance in recreating the office, well, we had just put a portion of Walt Disney's formal office on display at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library as part of D23's Treasures of the Walt Disney Archives exhibit. So the art department made their way up to Simi Valley and measured the various objects and furniture in the office for reproduction. Now, of course, they had to cheat things a little bit for camera angles, but it's certainly reminiscent of Walt Disney's office when you see it in the film. So, several hundred pieces of artwork from the production of Mary Poppins, including concept art and set designs, were provided to the Saving Mr. Banks team. Now, this wasn't just used for inspiration, but many of the pieces were actually reproduced and used as set decoration in the film, and we'll see a little bit of that in just a bit. But it wasn't just Saving Mr. Banks artwork, but other company-related artwork that was used in the film as well. As you can see here, when P.L. Travers arrives at the airport, she's greeted by her chauffeur, played by Paul Giamatti. He's holding a sign with her name on it and a Mickey Mouse logo. This was an official Mickey Mouse logo for the company. Now, it was from the earlier years of the studio of the company, but they must have really liked this one, so they used it. So let's take a quick peek at that scene.
Yeah, he does he?
Travers, P.L. Travers?
Mrs.
Okay. Well, welcome, Mrs. P.L. Travers. Welcome to the City of Angels.
Now, as you can see, they pulled that directly from company letterhead from the earlier days, from the Hyperion days, actually. Now, when P.L. Travers arrives at the studio where they did film for several days, she's greeted by the Sherman brothers and Don DeGrody. And behind them on the door of stage A is a Babes in Toyland logo. And this was, Babes in Toyland came out in 1961, which was the year of her visit. Now this was taken directly from the one-sheet poster for the film, so let's take a quick look at that.
This is the rest of you team. This is Dick and Bob Sherman, music and lyrics, voice, the one and only Mrs. P.L. Travers, the creator of our beloved Mary.
Poppins.
Who else?
Mary Poppins. Never ever just me.
So when she goes to Walt Disney's office, you see quite a few reproductions there, including movie posters. However, Walt Disney never actually put movie posters in his office, but they like the look of them. They're very colorful. And when you see his office here, behind his desk, there are two photos of Walt's actual daughters, Diane and Sharon, and two Norman Rockwell drawings, and these pieces were taken directly from the original and used for the film. Let's take a quick peek at that.
You know what, when Diane here was about 7 years old, and I was walking past her room, and she was on her bed reading to her sister Sharon, and those girls, they were just giggling their little socks off.
So this is certainly one of my favorites. This is a famous shot of Walt Disney on his Carrollwood Pacific Railroad when they had it set up at the studio in the early 1950s. And the Saving Mr. Banks team did something fun with this. Let's just take a look and see what they did. He hardly seems pleased with that. But the Saving Mr. Banks team did that a few other times with some other photos in the film as well, so keep a lookout for that next time you see it. So most of the Mary Poppins artwork that you see in the film is during the story meetings with the Sherman brothers and Don DeGrati. And you'll see a few pieces here, like some concept art. Now I'm going to show you a video, and you'll see some additional pieces, including costume sketches, which are all part of the Walt Disney Archives collection.
Oh, no, no. No, no, goodness me, no.
No?
The Banks' house doesn't look like that. No, no. Oh, do I even have to say it? Why in the world have you made Mrs. Banks a silly suffragette? This isn't Mr. Banks. This isn't him.
Yes, that's Mr. Banks.
But he has a set of moustaches.
Well, in the book, yes.
No, I told the illustrator I did not like the facial hair, but she chose to ignore me. Now, this time around, this is my film, and I shall have my way.
She's just a little ray of sunshine now. Now when there's a scene where Walt Disney meets P.L. Travers down at Disneyland. Now this is one of the things they added for dramatization, as P.L. Travers did not visit with Walt Disney. She did, however, visit on Easter Sunday in 1961, but it was with Disney story editor Bill Dover. So though she didn't go with Walt, she did see it during her visit. Now for this scene, the archives provided a multitude of photographs as well as Disneyland postcards and other items and souvenir guides so that they could help theme the certain areas or mask certain areas if necessary. Now this is one of the few movies that is ever filmed down at Disneyland, and interestingly enough, one of the others was That Thing You Do from 1996, which was written by and co-starred none other than Tom Hanks. Now, for the original Mary Poppins premiere, it was held at the Grauman's Chinese Theater, now the TCL Chinese Theater. And for the recreated premiere in Saving Mr. Banks, they went right back to the same location to have the premiere. And one of the major design elements are these photos that you see here of the cast members blown up. And since the archives has these in their photo collection, and they would have originally been with the publicity department, the exact same source material, the same exact negatives were used for the original premiere and the recreated premiere in Saving Mr. Banks. So that's pretty neat. So for the premiere, the archives provided video coverage and photos and invitations and other ephemera to help recreate the area, and they really did an incredible job. So I'm going to show you actually one more side-by-side, the original premiere and the premiere in Saving Mr. Banks.
Tonight, all of Hollywood awaits the world premiere of Walt Disney's Mary Poppins, acclaimed by everyone as his greatest achievement, and starring Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke. Here in the forecourt of the renowned Grauman's Chinese Theater, there's a surge of excitement. Famous stars are cheered by the crowds and are caught candidly by news photographers and the TV and motion picture cameras. So, for Hollywood, it's a night of dazzling stars, excitement, and colorful celebration. For Walt Disney, another triumph in the world of motion pictures.
So, perhaps the irony of all of this is once the production and promotion for the film wrapped, many of the props and costumes made their way into the collection of the Walt Disney Archives. So we put on display, around the time of the release of the film, a portion of Walt Disney's office in the original animation building. And this is not far from Walt Disney's actual office, which leads me nicely to my second topic, which are the newly or semi-newly restored offices of Walt Disney in the 3H wing of the original animation building. Now, we are happy to say that the offices are now part of the D23 studio tours that happen several times a year. So if you haven't been, do make your plans because it is quite an experience. Now, instead of listening to me talk about the restoration, I'm going to show you a video. This is something that we normally only show to guests who are about to tour the office, but you guys are a special crowd, so I think you should see it.
For more than 90 years, the Walt Disney Studios has been the epicenter of dreams. The magic, creativity, and innovation that have emanated from these 51 carefully manicured acres in the San Fernando Valley under the inspirational leadership of Walt Disney are the stuff of legend. The animators, writers, musicians, artists, and filmmakers who have walked these hallways, who have dreamed up timeless stories in its offices, have done nothing less than shape American popular culture, change the face of family entertainment forever, and rewrite entertainment history. Opening in 1940 and built with the proceeds from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the Disney Studio lot was for many years home to everything the company did. At the center of the studio was the animation building, a structure as innovative and groundbreaking as the work the Disney Studio created every day. The animation building was carefully designed to help streamline the creative process and custom tailored to meet Walt's desires to create a campus where his artists could create without the pressures of the outside world. By the mid-1950s, Walt presided over a studio at the height of its creative power. From his offices nestled on the third floor of the animation building, he was all at once creating animated classics, live-action films, unforgettable TV series, and exploring new forms of entertainment, including a revolutionary concept in family entertainment called Disneyland. Within these walls, Walt not only oversaw a prodigious amount of work, he also welcomed an impressive list of visitors over the years, from composers and artists like Leopold Stokowski and the Sherman Brothers, to authors, foreign dignitaries, representatives from companies like Kodak, animation pioneers like the Fleischers, and even young talent like Catherine Beaumont. Suite 3H was much more than just an executive office. Its walls were witness to more talent, innovation, and creativity than any other office in Hollywood. A few years after Walt's passing in 1966, Dave Smith, Disney legend and the founder of the Walt Disney Archives, was the first person to enter the office suite and document with precision Walt's historic offices.
It was really eerie for me to come into Walt's office. The first time I had a chance to come in here was before they gave me a key, and the janitor had forgotten to lock the door one day, so I snuck in here. Here was a man that was so important and so famous, and I had access to his office, and here I could come in and sit in his desk chair, and you could just feel the aura in here of the great man and all of the things that he did here. So, as I say, it was very eerie, because it wasn't long after that that the company asked me if I would do a complete inventory of Walt's offices, and so I went and listed every chair and table and desk, but also every book on the bookcase and every paper clip in the desk drawers and all that sort of thing.
The offices are the original spaces that Walt Disney occupied from 1940 until 1966. The suite has been painstakingly restored to appear almost exactly the way it was when it was Walt's office. On behalf of the Walt Disney Archives and the Walt Disney Company, welcome to Suite 3H.
In conclusion, I just wanted to read a quote from Bob Iger from the grand opening of the offices. We put this permanent exhibit together to serve as a source of inspiration, a reminder to have great ambition, to take bold creative risks, to constantly innovate and push the limits of possibility, to relentlessly pursue perfection and tell fantastic stories that touch people's hearts. That was Walt Disney. And that's really why we wanted to do this, to share this creative place where this inspiring man worked for 26 years. So like I said, if you haven't been, do make your plans, because it is quite an amazing experience. So now I'm going to turn it over to John Healy, who's going to talk a little music to you.
Great. Hit forward. I'm putting on these gloves because we're going to talk about music that we have retained at the studio from films and TV shows for up to 90 years. And we have, you know, the composer's handwritten pencil work and the musicians writing the lyrics and other songs that we have retained in acid-free boxes and put aside. But we've also digitized quite a few productions, over 300 productions. The scores, music parts if we have them, sketches and things like that. And my staff tells me, don't even think about this music without putting on these white gloves. So that's where I'm going today. I also oversee a concert rental business out of Disney that provides individual arrangements of music, some scores from the films directly, and then also full evenings of music. Maybe one or two of you have seen Fantasia or Pixar or Pirates of the Caribbean in the concert hall with your local orchestra. Maybe not. But we are doing that, and so we actually go back to these original scores, like for Fantasia. We go back and find the original notations, and so that we can prepare the music to be performed live on stage. For example, on the left side you see some of the Sorcerer's Apprentice music and some of the changes and edits that were made, and of course for our modern musicians we fix those edits and make new scores. We also do Pirates of the Caribbean. We had to go back and find all of Hans Zimmer's scores and add back in the percussion parts and keyboards and things in order to make it playable live on stage. And recently we've done the Halloween Nightmare Before Christmas program with Danny Elfman and some of his the voice talent that did that film. And as you see on the left, there's one of the original scores that we always start with before we complete the new music for the shows. And Alan Menken's agent suggested that we put together a live Little Mermaid show last summer, and we performed it at the Hollywood Bowl. They found some talent who we thought would be a lot of fun to come and sing. Sarah Bareilles is, of course, a great fan of the music. Rebel Wilson was our Ursula, and Titus Burgess was our crab. And it was a lot of fun. But the music, as you see on the left side there, is the original scores, the kind of cream color. And we started with that, and then we begin to listen to the actual recordings from the score. And surprisingly, there are a lot of changes from what is written on the original scores. These are working documents, and as they're working in the studio, things change. They decide maybe this melody is not what we want, you know, in the final mix, or we drop an instrument. And so these documents become kind of reference, and then we update them to sound like what we're all used to hearing from the films. Another example, like this one on the left, it says at the top, Under the Sea, and which was kind of how the character sings the song, but the official name of the song is Under the Sea. And so we'll find changes, some small like that, and some much larger. Sometimes we don't even find the score, and we have to recreate it in order to complete our live show. And on the right, I have you know, one of our vocal parts from the Little Mermaid song, Under the Sea. And creatively, in this live show, we decided to increase the number of songs in the show by bringing in some of the Broadway songs that had been written for the Little Mermaid on stage. And then we had to decide, well, what are we going to put on screen? And so our friends from the ARL provided some concept art from different parts of the film as they're developing the concepts of what the characters might look like. And we used those images while we sang songs from Broadway. A little bit unusual, but it was a lovely show. And so as we're going through, there's Beluga Sevruga there on the left side, the spell that Ursula sings, and on the right, there's the happy ending that the choir sings at the end of the film. And myself being a singer as well as an executive at Disney, I said, I want to be in that choir when you do that. And what do I have to do that? And so the vocal contractor said, well, send me a recording of you singing and let's see if you're good enough to be on stage. Well, fortunately, I made the cut, and so I was also preparing the music for the live show, but I got a call about a week before, and they said, well, when are you going to come in for your costume? I thought this was just a choir where you kind of stand with the music, but apparently I was going to become one of Prince Eric's crewmates, and that's me on the left before the show starts, and then me standing with Alan Menken. And it was an interesting thing to be both the executive but embedded into the cast as well. So the next picture is Jodie Benson on the left back in the day with the film creators. And then that's me on stage with Jodie just before the last rehearsal, I think. And then of all the pictures of me on stage in the live show, the only one I could get is one where I'm hidden totally behind poor Titus there. That's my shirt, I tell you it's true. And then I'm way up in the top in one of those guys on the right. But what a fun show, and the music that we have retained through these years informs everything we do, and we are so thankful that Disney gives the resources for us to be able to keep these things. Moving on to Mike.
Alrighty. Well, I'm so glad that Justin introduced us as a nerdy group. So I'm about to fully embrace my nerddom. What's more nerdy than a guy standing behind a podium? Well, Walt Disney Imagineering has been described that blends technical know-how with imagination. My time with you today is going to share how the Imagineering Art Library blends technical know-how to support artistic expression. The Walt Disney Imagineering Art Collection consists of approximately 130,000 pieces of concept art. And I say approximately because that collection grows every day as we are creating more and more artwork. That's artwork for all of our theme parks and resorts and cruise lines. And there are over 2,000 Imagineering artists who have contributed to that collection and continue to contribute to that collection. And I wanted to share just a few of those artists, and I'm sure you will recognize every single one of them. Artists such as Herb Ryman, John Hench, Mark Davis, Claude Coates, Dorothea Redmond, Harper Goff, Sam McKim, Mary Blair, Tony Baxter. Now, I believe that art inspires happiness. Seeing the artwork of some of your favorite attractions or from your favorite Disney artists often is a joyful experience. Why is that? Well, sometimes we just don't know. But viewing it has a positive and perhaps inexpressible effect on us, the viewer. I said I was going to get my nerd on, right? Well, here we go. Science, yes, science explains it like this. There's a neurological, perceptual, and cognitive sequence that occurs when we view art. Meaning, our physical self goes about passing information from our eyes to our brain. We then process that information, and we gain an understanding more or less of what we've seen. Finally, we have a thought or a judgment about what we've seen. And the result of all this, the sequence, is often a perception which is influenced by our past experience and our expectations. I believe there's a human experience as well. And the human experience is when you see artwork from the Imagineering collection that represents or connects you to a personal or shared experience from one of our attractions or themed environments, it's usually an experience that has made you happy at some level. Seeing the artwork of that, consciously or unconsciously, is a moment of joy for you. That's the human experience. So if there is that much power in viewing artwork, if somehow we connect that strongly to it, it would make sense to represent that artwork in the best way possible. That's what we do at the Imagineering Art Library for each and every piece of artwork. Now, unless you're in a museum or a gallery, there's a good chance the artwork that you see from our collection is a reproduction. Well, part of our strategy as caretakers of this amazing artwork is to, frankly, make it last forever. Now, most damage to original artwork occurs from handling. When it's sitting in storage, it's resting and there's no light hitting it, no one's touching it. But when you handle it, that's when things can happen. So a strategy that we employ in the goal of collection permanence is to avoid handling it. And one way to reduce handling is to create a clone of that original art. We do this through art documentation, and that's a photographic process. So what we do is we construct a careful environment in which a digital representation of each piece of artwork is created. So here's the nuts and bolts of that. This is actually a view of the Imagineering Art Documentation Photo Studio. So this is what you're looking at. We have a traditional 4x5 view camera. You know, you've seen pictures of Ansel Adams, right, with the black fabric over his head looking under the hood. Essentially, that's what this is. But there's a very special art documentation lens on this camera, which has a very narrow depth of field because what it is photographing is a flat piece of art. So it's focusing all of its technology into that very narrow plane. Second is a digital scanning back, and that goes in place of a traditional film back, and that slides into the back of the camera. Now listen carefully, creating the equivalent of a 284 megapixel camera. Wow. So next would be a lighting setup, and this provides even illumination at a specific color temperature. And then lastly, you can see it on the table there on the screen, to view and accurately adjust the captures made with this setup, we use a monitor with a specific gamma and a specific brightness balanced to the same color temperature as the lights used to illuminate the artwork during capture. So, now that we have a clone of that original artwork, what now? If I were to give that digital file to anyone, how would they know what the art truly looks like? Is it being viewed on a handheld device, a tablet, a monitor of unknown calibration? An accurate display of the true image is nearly impossible on these devices. So how does one go about understanding what the original artwork looks like? The strategy we use is to produce a physical print that accurately represents the appearance of that original artwork. As you might imagine, producing such a print is no simple task, and the Imagineering Art Library leverages the work of 2 standards groups to help accomplish this amazing feat of a color-accurate print. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST for short, was established in 1901, and NIST is one of the nation's oldest physical science laboratories and is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. They were originally created to provide the United States with global industrial competitiveness, and NIST continues to support the smallest technologies and the most complex human-made creations with the best possible measurements, technologies, and standards. Now, the other group is the International Organization for Standards. They develop and publish, wait for it, international standards. This organization has created ISO standard 3664. Well, what does that do, Mike? It specifies viewing conditions for both reflective and transmissive media. So think of artwork that light bounces off of, and transparencies or monitors that light flows through. This ISO 3664 standard informs us what a color viewing station is supposed to be. The Art Library viewing station you see here is used to compare printed reproductions to the original art or native digital file they are meant to accurately represent. So this environment for viewing and comparing prints to the art from which they were made, it follows the standards and uses the measurement tools from both of those previously mentioned and respected organizations. The lighting in this viewing station is balanced to the same photo studio lighting specifications, and the monitor in this setup is calibrated exactly the same as the monitor in the photo studio where the original digital file was created. And then lastly, as the final part of the color match solution, a print profile is employed for a specific type of paper and a specific individual color printer to help create a print which accurately matches the original art. So it's that digital file and that color match print, which I just described. Those are the tools used by anyone partnering with Walt Disney Imagineering to reproduce any of our artwork. Now I'd like to share with you one such project. In 2016, the Disney Wonder cruise ship was being refreshed. Part of that program was the creation of guest suites in the names of all the artists I mentioned earlier. As you would imagine, the artwork by these Imagineering legends is prominently displayed in these suites. The Art Library was part of the Imagineering team collaborating with an interior design firm in New York for this effort. Artwork files and color match prints were sent. Print samples were received, they were reviewed, and eventually approved by the Art Library. The final printing of art was completed, framed, and installed. In this instance, as with all uses of Walt Disney Imagineering artwork, the best technical know-how goes into making your viewing experience the best it can be, whether it's on a Disney cruise ship, in a publication, or on product. For the Imagineering Art Library, it truly is all about the art and creating a joyful experience for you, our guests.
Thanks, Mike. Well, Tina and I would like to talk about is something that the ARL Animation Studio has been partnering with for the past couple of years. Now, were any of you at the Bambi 75th